Good morning, Algebra 1 students. Today we're going to look at Lesson 69 together. The title of the lesson is Factoring Trinomials, and that's exactly what we're going to learn how to do today. So first, let's establish what a trinomial is. Let's remember what we call that. So if you just look down here really quickly at number 1, you're going to see x squared plus 6x plus 8. Well, we know tri in the term trinomial means 3, so it is simply a polynomial that has 3 terms to it. So we have an x squared, we have 6x, and we have 8. That's 1, 2, 3 terms. So in this polynomial, this one here in particular would be called a trinomial. Okay, so what we want to look at today is how do I factor out a trinomial? So the first thing I want to kind of show us here is what we use when we have two terms like this where we have, actually let me highlight it so it doesn't get so busy. We have an x plus 9 times an x plus 1. We have two expressions here that are being multiplied together, and you all know how to distribute that to get that back together into its original form of a trinomial. We always use what's called the FOIL method. And the FOIL method is simply states for, you kind of blow this up a little bit here. The FOIL method means you multiply your first two terms in each one of those expressions. Then we multiply the outside terms together. Then we multiply the inside terms together. And then, of course, finally, the last terms together. That's how we get the word FOIL. The FOIL method is very commonly known. So what the FOIL method actually means is that you're taking every term that's inside this expression and you're going to multiply it with every term that's inside this expression. Okay, so in looking at that, you can see they took the x's and multiplied those together. Then they took the x and the 1 and multiplied it together. And then they bumped down to the bottom and they took the 9 and the x and then multiplied it together. And then finally the 9 and the 1 and they multiplied that together. And over here you can see that they made that list for us. All right, so let's establish what an inverse operation is. You hear me say that all the time. You'll hear that all the time in your algebra classes. What does the inverse operation mean? Or just the term inverse. The term inverse means opposite. If I were to ask you what the inverse operation of addition is, you should tell me subtraction. If I asked you what the inverse operation of division is, you would tell me multiplication. Okay, so in this case, I bring that up because I want us to kind of think about what the inverse operation of FOIL is to factor. So when you use the FOIL method to multiply, to put all these terms together, to undo the original, when you put it back in this form, it's going to look like this. Okay, and so when you take this trinomial and you want to put it back into that format, that's called factoring. So going from this to this is the FOIL. Going backwards is to factor. Okay, those are inverse operations. All right, so we always start with our trinomial, and we're going to work backwards to find the original binomials. Okay, now there are several methods for doing this. We're going to start with something known as the diamond method. This is really fun, but you do need practice in order to come and understand this. Before I bump down to that first example, though, I'm going to actually work out what has happened up here. Okay, so once you've distributed x plus 9 times x plus 1, first what you're going to come out with is it's going to look like this. You're going to have x squared plus x plus 9x plus 9 when you use the FOIL method. Okay, that's the first thing you're going to come out with, and I'm going to write that down here. And if you would like to write this right down here, this would be a good place for you to put it. I'm going to actually now combine these two terms because they're x terms, right? They have the same last name, the same family name. So x squared plus 10x plus 9. We're going to write that down here. Okay, now I'm going to go back up here for just a moment as I want you to think about something. When we put this together, think about how we got these numbers. When you multiplied these, when you distributed from x plus 9 times x plus 1, and you got this x plus 9x over here, you added those together to get 10x, right? So this is actually the sum. Okay, how did we get the 9? We multiplied the 9 times the 1 together when we did our FOIL method. So this ends up simply our product. Okay, yes, we've multiplied all of those to come up with this trinomial. But what I want you to just kind of keep in mind is we're going to call this 9 the product because we multiplied 9 times 1 to get it. And then we multiplied to get this x and this plus 9 up here. But when we put them together and got 10x, now we look at that as the sum. Okay, so we're going to use this very trinomial to work backwards. And we're going to use the diamond method. So I'm going to have you build one in right here. Okay, and we're going to list the product that we just talked about right here. So the product we said was 9, and it's actually a positive 9. Okay, so you're going to want to write the positive 9 there with it. Okay, and then the sum we said is positive 10x, but we just want the coefficient. So let's put positive 10 on the bottom of our diamond as our sum. And then we're going to list the factors of that product 9. So what are some factors there? We could have a positive 3 times a positive 3. We could have a negative 3 times a negative 3. So what I'm doing is looking for combinations that would give me this positive 9. We could have positive 1 times positive 9, or negative 1 times negative 9, right? Any of those combinations multiply to give me positive 9. How do I know which ones I want to pick? Because this is how we know how to go back to this form of figuring out how do I get x plus 9 plus x plus 1. Well, we always now first start with, we put this one in orange, so we always start with this x squared. How could I go back to x squared? Well, I would have to multiply x times x. When I multiply x times x, it brings me back to x squared. Okay, so remember, I'm just working backwards now from the trinomial. What I'm going to put as my signs here, and the numbers I select to put here, we go to the diamond for. Okay, so I'm going to look at my product of 9 and my sum of 10. Whatever I choose for my product, to get my product of 9, so whatever factors, these are actually, let's go ahead and list here. This is factors. These are factors number 1, and we have factors number 2 over here. Okay, so whichever pair of factors I pick have to multiply to give me the positive 9, and when I add them, they have to give me the positive 10. So let's look at those combinations. So positive 3 times positive 3 is positive 9. But when I add these, what do I get? Positive 3 plus 3 is positive 6. That's not the sum we're looking for. We're looking for positive 10. So those do not work. Negative 3 plus a negative 3 gives me negative 6. That did not give me a positive 10 for my sum. So those don't work. Positive 1 times a positive 9 would give me a positive 9 for my product. And if I add those together, what does that give me for my sum? Adding a positive 9 and a positive 9 gives me a positive 10, right? If I add those together. So that looks like the one we're after. Let's just look at the last combination to be sure. Negative 1 plus a negative 1 would give me a negative 10. But the sum I'm after is a positive 10. So that last one doesn't work. So here's the factors that I need, because when I multiply them, they give me my positive 9, and when I add them, they give me my positive 10. So the combination of numbers here that I want is 1 and 9, both of those being positive. That's how we get back to our original form. And I noticed they actually put the 9 and the 1 in the opposite order. It doesn't matter. You're going to come out with the same one. Some of you might put x plus 1 times x plus 9. Some of you might put it in the way that you see it typed out above. Either way, either one of these will come back to its original form of x squared plus 10x plus 9. The key is selecting the factors that will give you positive 9, and that when you add those factors together, if I pull those same two numbers and add them together, they will give me the positive 10. Okay, so we're always focused on the coefficient of x and then the constant number to the far right in our trinomial. Now let's try one down here. Let's look at example 1. We have a diamond built over here. Actually, we can build our own, I guess. Well, we can use the one to the right. Let's do that. We'll use the one to the right for number 1. Let's look at number 1. So what we're trying to figure out is when I would use the inverse operation of FOIL by factoring this out into to the binomials. And we're going to use our diamond method over here. So the two numbers that we're going to focus on here, let me pull them out, is going to be 6, a positive 6, and a positive 8. So let's go write those over here. What's our product need to be? 8 is going to be the product. Remember, this is our product. And positive 6 is our sum. So we have positive 8. And our sum is positive 6. So the factors that we pick for 8 have to add together to give us 6. So let's pick some factors of 8. So we could have, and it has to not just be 8, but positive 8. So we have positive 2, positive 4. That would give me positive 8. We have positive 1 times positive 8. That would give me a positive 8 as a product. So now we have to look at them in order to know which ones we have to pick, because only one pair is correct. The ones that you're going to pick are going to be the ones that when you add them together, they give you your sum of positive 6. So let's add these together. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger here. If I add together positive 2 plus a positive 4, I get a positive 6. So that looks like that's going to work okay. But let's just verify that the others are not the ones. Positive 1 plus positive 8 would give me a positive 8 when I multiply them, but positive 8 when I multiply them, but a positive 9 when I add them. But we're looking for positive 6 when we add them. So that second pair is not correct, but the first pair is. So we want to use a positive 2 and a positive 4. So we're going to have x plus 2 and x plus 4. Okay, and you can double check this too. You can go back to the trinomial. Let's do that. So if I did x times x FOIL method, x times x is x squared. X times a positive 4 is 4x. 2 times x is 2x. And 2 times 4 is a positive 8. So we add our x terms together right here. We get plus 6x plus 8. So you're already back to the original trinomial form. And that's how you factor a trinomial. All right, so let's try number 2. Now you're going to have to build your own diamond here. So just put a big X. We're going to have our product up here, our sum down here, factor number 1 here, and factor number 2 over here. Okay, and sometimes you're not going to need to list all of them. Some of you are going to be able to identify exactly those factors rather quickly. So here's our sum. The sum is negative 3. And the product is negative 10. All right, so let's list it's a mouthful. Let's list factors of the product of negative 10. Okay, so it could be 1 times 10, or negative 10, rather. That would give me, if I added that, that gives me a negative 9, and that's not what I'm after. The sum I'm after is negative 3. So those are not going to work. How about let's do positive 2 minus 5. Okay, now let's think about this one. I will get a negative 3 when I add those together, and they do give me a negative 10 when I multiply them. But watch this. I want you to be careful, because I want us to say we used a negative 2 and a positive 5, because both of those would give us a negative 10 when I multiply them, right? Remember, we're looking to have them multiply to give us the product of negative 10. That part works. But when you add them together, you're going to end up getting a positive 3. And that one doesn't work because we're after the sum of negative 3. Okay, so it looks like these are the factors we're after. So to work backwards and factor that trinomial out, we would have x plus 2 times x minus 5. Okay? Now let's do a few practice problems together, and you're going to notice in your lesson today, all of those highlighted problems are actually this FOIL method working backwards. I'm sorry, using the inverse of the FOIL method and factoring these trinomials. So let's look at our practice set. Those are coming from your textbook on page 283. If you want to try one of these on your own or all three of these on your own and come back and check your answers with me, you can do that. Otherwise, you can just stay with me, however you want to do that. So the trinomial for letter A is x squared minus x minus 42. Okay, we want to work backwards to find what were those two expressions that we need here. So I'm going to build in my nice little diamond, and I'm going to put product up here, sum down here, factor number 1 here, and factor number 2 here. All right, so we're looking for factors of 42. Well, there are several, so we have to think about what are we trying to accomplish here. Our product is going to be this number here, negative 42, so we're going to fill that in. And our sum is going to be, be careful here, what is it? We have to put one in there because there's no number, no coefficient. But when there's no coefficient, we know that it's assumed to be 1, right? So negative 1 is going to be our sum. So let's put that right down here at its sum, okay? The product is always this far number, the constant number, which is negative 42 in this case, and the sum is negative 1. All right, so let's figure it out. We have lots of factors of 42, but the first ones that come to my mind are 6 and 7. One of them must be positive and one of them must be negative. When I add them together, they must give me the sum of negative 1. So do they? Plus 6 minus 7, or 6 minus 7 does give me negative 1, doesn't it? So that looks like that's going to be our pair that we want right here. But let me just show you why it's not this way. Negative 7 times, positive 7 times a negative 6 does give me negative 42, but it gives me a positive 1 when I add those together, and I'm looking for a negative 1. So that pair does not work. So we have found the pair right away. So we're going to have x plus 6 and x minus 7. Now, believe it or not, in time, you're not going to even have to use this diamond method. You're going to get so efficient at this that you're going to be able to look at it right in its original form right here as a trinomial and factor those numbers out of there right away just by doing them in your head. All right, letter B. We have x squared plus x minus 42. It looks almost the same. The only difference is the coefficient of x is different. The coefficient of x is now a positive 1. Okay, so now we're looking at finding, let me do a different color over here. Okay, now we're trying to find the factors of a negative 42, but when they add together, they must give us positive 1, which actually, look back over in that first problem, we actually found those over there, but let's do it because I want you to have the example built in. Your product, your sum, factor 1, and factor 2. I just abbreviated. We'll put product up here so I remember what that stands for. Okay, so our product is going to be negative 42. And our sum is going to be positive 1. Okay, which we discovered earlier that if I chose a positive 7 and a negative 6, multiplying those gives me the negative 42, but when I add them, it gives me a positive 1, which is what I'm after down here. Okay, so there we found those right away, simply because we found them in the last problem, kind of by accident. So we have x plus 7 in this case, and x minus 6. So see, the factors are actually complete the opposite of the ones in problem number A, or problem letter A. All right, let's look at C, and that'll be our last example, and you'll have lots of these to practice today. The last one is x squared minus 6x minus 16. Let's go ahead and get our parentheses ready and our diamond. So I have my product, my sum, factor 1 and factor 2. So let's figure out some combinations of factors that will give me a negative 16. And then, of course, when I add them, we want them to give us a negative 6. So let's write that product in there. Negative 16 is the product. Negative 6 is the sum. So let's get some factors of negative 16. So we could have, I always think of the ones that would make the most sense to me would be not always 1 times itself, but sometimes those are the factors that we need. In this case, I'm going to start with 2, we'll say a negative 2, a positive 8. We'll check out what a negative 8. We'll do a negative 8 and a positive 2, because both of those would give me negative 16, right? If those don't work, we'll have a 1 and a 16, and we can also try a positive 1 and a negative 16. So let's check this out. And actually, I want to write this in the other order. I want this to be a positive 2 here and a negative 8. We'll put the numbers on the same side. All right, so what do I get here? So I add together a negative 2 plus 8. I'm going to get a positive 6. That's not what I want, is it? I want a negative 6. If I multiply a positive 2 times a negative 8, I get negative 16. And if I add those together, I get a negative 6. So bingo, that looks like the right one. I'm going to cross the first one out. Let's double check on the next two. Negative 1 times positive 16 does give me negative 16, but when I add those together, I get a positive 15. Not so. Same thing here. Positive 1 times negative 16 gives me negative 16. If I add those together, I get a negative 15. That's not correct either, because I'm looking for something that adds together to give me negative 6, which actually these two factors here do that for us. So if I have x plus 2 and x minus 8, I have successfully factored that trinomial. X plus 2 times x minus 8 would bring me back to that form. Okay, so those are your 3 examples there for you, plus the 2 in the lesson. Go ahead and move on to all these problems. The ones that are highlighted are the ones that are actually with the diamond method, and you can just build those into each one and use those. Remember, we just label them like this: product, sum, factor 1, factor 2. Okay? All right, have fun with that lesson, and please remember that there will be a test next Tuesday, so you'll want to make sure you have your 3 inch by 5 inch index card ready. If you're going to use one, you can put anything you want on there, front and back. Please use your review sheet to study from. Review sheets are also going to be due at the beginning of the class period on Tuesday. It must be completed and correct in order for it to count towards something on your test. All right, guys, have a great weekend, and I'll see you next Tuesday. Toodaloo.